Subtle undermining is one of the most dangerous forms of hatred because it is invisible to many, but it penetrates the soul with a silent precision. When someone undermines you in subtle ways, they are not shouting their hatred from the rooftops. They do not need to be overt because their intent is hidden, and that is what makes it so insidious. You might find yourself questioning your own worth, doubting your abilities, or feeling a sense of unease that you cannot name. And all of this happens without them ever raising their voice. It starts in small ways. A comment disguised as a joke, a question framed like concern, or a compliment laced with critique. Are you sure you can handle this? They ask, and the weight of the doubt they implant lingers far longer than the words themselves. They are masters of disguise, hiding their contempt behind a mask of civility or false care. This kind of undermining is strategic. It is not chaos, it is calculated. Every word, every action, every expression is a tiny weapon aimed at destabilizing your confidence. They will not directly attack your accomplishments because they know that would be too obvious, too easy to resist. Instead, they chip away at the foundation of your self-belief, eroding it grain by grain. You might notice a pattern only after months, maybe years. Perhaps they dismiss your ideas in meetings with subtle scoffs, or they forget to include you in opportunities where your contribution would shine. These are not accidents. They are signals, and they are deliberate. Every overlooked message, every casual dismissal, every backhanded comment is a thread in a web designed to make you question your place in the world. Subtle undermining is psychologically exhausting. It forces you into a constant state of vigilance. You begin to second-guess everything you say, every decision you make. When someone is quietly undermining you, you can feel the tension before you even see it. The pause after your words, the micro-expression that flickers across their face, the slight tightening of their posture, all of it communicates judgment. And yet, because it is subtle, you are left wondering if it is real or if it is your imagination. This uncertainty is intentional. They want you to doubt yourself more than they want you to confront them. The subtlety is the power. It is important to understand the psychology behind this. People who engage in subtle undermining do so because overt confrontation requires courage, but quiet hatred thrives in shadows. They may envy your success, fear your abilities, or resent the qualities in you that they lack. They cannot possess what you have, and so they seek to diminish it without drawing attention to themselves. This is why subtle undermining is often cloaked in politeness, humor, or concern. It is never about giving feedback or helping you improve. It is about control. They want to control how you see yourself, how others see you, and how the energy of your presence is experienced in shared spaces. Subtle undermining also attacks the emotional core. You may feel inexplicably drained after interactions, or find yourself replaying conversations in your mind, analyzing every detail, wondering if you said the wrong thing or appeared incompetent. This mental replay is the hallmark of subtle sabotage. Unlike open conflict, which forces resolution or confrontation, subtle undermining leaves wounds invisible but deep. It makes you question your judgment, your talents, and even your moral compass. You start to carry the weight of their unspoken judgment as if it were your own failing. And the longer this continues, the more internalized it becomes. You start to censor yourself, curtailing your voice, dimming your light, shrinking your presence in the world, because the subtle underminer has taught you, without ever saying it, that you are too much or never enough. They often operate in social dynamics, too, where they manipulate perception. A compliment becomes a critique, praise is minimized, and your failures, however small, are highlighted in ways that others may not even notice. They see doubt not only in you but in those around you, creating an environment where your achievements feel diminished and your efforts feel futile. And because it is subtle, others may not see the true intent. They may see a joking comment or a friendly suggestion, and you are left alone in the truth of your experience. This isolation is part of the method. They are not looking for immediate confrontation. They are looking for the slow, quiet erosion of your confidence. Subtle undermining also thrives on repetition. One comment may feel insignificant, but dozens of them over weeks and months build an invisible wall around your self-assurance. It is like a slow drip of water on stone. Each drop alone does little, but over time, the constant pressure reshapes the landscape. You might not even recognize it at first because you are too busy navigating life and your own responsibilities. But in the quiet moments when you reflect on your interactions, when you assess your feelings about your capabilities or your worth, you realize the effect has been profound. You have been conditioned to doubt, and doubt is the ultimate tool of someone who hates you without ever openly declaring it. One of the most dangerous aspects of subtle undermining is that it can appear as care, advice, or concern. They say, "I'm just trying to help," but the help is always in the form of diminishing you. They critique your style, your choices, your abilities, your emotions, and then frame it as guidance. But guidance is meant to elevate, to empower. What they offer is a mirror reflecting insecurities, a tool to manipulate your perception of yourself. It is emotionally exhausting, mentally draining, and spiritually corrosive. You start to internalize their disdain, carrying it in your posture, your speech, your interactions with others, as if it were a truth about yourself rather than a reflection of their own malice. Subtle undermining teaches you one of life's harshest lessons, that the most dangerous enemies are not always loud. They do not confront you openly. They do not declare war. Instead, they enter your life quietly under the guise of normalcy and begin to erode your foundation piece by piece. They hide behind politeness, friendship, and civility because they know overt hostility would be met with resistance, confrontation, or exposure. Instead, they choose the silent path where their hatred can fester and grow unseen while you struggle to name the source of the unease you feel. And because it is subtle, you are often alone with it, questioning yourself, your perception, and your worth. Consistent avoidance is a silent declaration of hatred. Unlike overt attacks or loud confrontations, it manifests in absence, in the spaces where presence should have been felt. When someone consistently avoids you, it is not merely a matter of circumstance, coincidence, or a busy schedule. There is an intention behind the distance, an invisible boundary they erect to keep you outside of their world. This avoidance may appear polite on the surface, masked by excuses, polite messages, or indirect interactions, but beneath the veneer, it carries the weight of rejection, of conscious or unconscious disdain. They are saying, without speaking, that your existence in proximity is unwelcome, that your energy, your presence, your voice is something they would rather do without. Avoidance is not always obvious at first. It can be subtle, almost imperceptible. They may respond late to messages, offer minimal engagement, or consistently forget appointments, conversations, or events where you might appear. They may arrange their schedules in ways that make contact with you difficult or improbable. They may redirect conversations away from topics where you are central or avoid physical spaces where your presence is expected. Each of these actions, small in isolation, becomes a pattern over time, and the pattern communicates more loudly than words ever could. What starts as minor oversight accumulates, forming a consistent barrier between you and them. You begin to sense that their absence is not random, that it is intentional, and that each avoidance is a reflection of a deeper sentiment, a sentiment rooted in dislike or even hatred. The psychology of consistent avoidance is complex. People who engage in this behavior may do so out of fear, insecurity, envy, or resentment, but underlying all these motivations is a refusal to engage with your energy directly. They do not want to confront, to communicate, or to coexist with you in a meaningful way. By maintaining distance, they protect themselves from feelings of discomfort, jealousy, or vulnerability, but at the same time, they express a covert hostility. Avoidance communicates judgment without confrontation and hatred without exposure. You are left to interpret their absence, to feel its impact, and often to internalize its meaning in ways that can be more painful than overt criticism. Consistent avoidance also manipulates perception. When someone avoids you regularly, it forces a shift in the dynamic of attention and presence. You begin to question whether your attempts to connect are welcome, whether your contributions are valued, or whether your presence is inherently disruptive to them. This doubt is not accidental, it is the effect they cultivate intentionally or unconsciously. Avoidance creates uncertainty, and uncertainty is a tool of control. It erodes confidence, forces self-reflection under duress, and leaves you constantly scanning for signals of acceptance or rejection. Each missed call, unanswered message, or cancelled plan reinforces the invisible message that they wish to remove themselves from your life entirely without ever articulating the reasons. The emotional impact of consistent avoidance is profound. Unlike open conflict, where energy can be directed outward and resolved, avoidance forces energy inward. You carry the weight of absence, of silence, of invisible barriers that prevent natural connection. You may feel frustration, sadness, confusion, or even shame, wondering if you have done something to provoke this distance, if you are in some way unworthy of their attention. And the harder you try to reach them, the more the pattern reinforces itself, because avoidance is a form of control. They dictate the rhythm of interaction, the presence or absence of communication, and in doing so, they assert dominance over the emotional space between you. Avoidance is often paired with subtle justifications. They may offer excuses that sound reasonable, masking the true sentiment behind polite words. "I've been so busy." "I forgot." "I didn't mean to." Next time, these phrases soften the impact of absence, but they do not change the underlying behavior. You begin to notice patterns, repeated delays, consistent postponements, chronic non-committal responses. The polite excuses are a shield, protecting them from confrontation, but they cannot hide the persistent truth that your presence is undesired. Over time, the repetition of avoidance becomes a language of hatred, a communication that says more in silence than they would dare say in words. Physical and emotional avoidance are equally potent. Physically, they may choose spaces, paths, or routines that minimize encounters with you. They may avoid meetings, social gatherings, or casual interactions where your presence is expected. Emotionally, they may withhold engagement, interest, or vulnerability. They do not ask about your life, they do not share theirs, and they do not create connection. Their silence is a wall, a deliberate absence that communicates distance more effectively than confrontation. And because it is consistent, because it is repeated across contexts, you cannot ignore it. You feel the weight of their avoidance in every interaction or lack thereof, and that weight accumulates, pressing down on your awareness, shaping your perception of yourself in relation to them. The subtlety of avoidance is also its cruelty. They do not attack directly, which means you have no target for anger, no clear enemy. Instead, you are left navigating a terrain of absence where every interaction or lack of interaction becomes a source of anxiety. You may attempt to seek clarity, to understand why they behave this way, only to encounter further avoidance or vague responses. This pattern forces you to confront uncertainty, doubt, and emotional discomfort constantly. Over time, it becomes clear that the avoidance is not about circumstance, but about sentiment. They do not wish to be near you, they do not wish to engage with you, and they do not wish to acknowledge your presence in their world. The consistency of this pattern is what makes it unmistakable, what allows the truth of their dislike to emerge without a single word of confrontation. Persistent negativity is one of the most unmistakable signs that someone harbors deep-seated hatred. Unlike subtle undermining or avoidance, which operate in the shadows, persistent negativity is a storm that follows you relentlessly. It is not occasional criticism or fleeting frustration. It is a pattern, a constant presence that colors every interaction, every word, every glance. When someone is consistently negative toward you, it is never neutral. Every statement, every observation, every reaction is infused with judgment, with resistance, with the energy of opposition. It is exhausting to encounter because it forces you to carry their disapproval, their contempt, as if it were part of your environment, as if it were inevitable. This negativity is rarely direct or obvious. It comes wrapped in casual comments, in seemingly trivial observations, in half-hearted acknowledgments that hide a deeper critique. "I'm surprised you managed that," they might say. Or, "Well, that's one way to do it," leaving a trace of doubt that lingers long after the words are spoken. Persistent negativity operates in the spaces between meaning, in pauses, in tone, in inflection. It is in the sighs, the raised eyebrows, the reluctant nods that communicate disapproval without needing explicit confrontation. And because it is subtle yet constant, you begin to internalize it, to weigh it against your own sense of accomplishment, your own perception of worth, until the negativity becomes a shadow you carry everywhere, a fog that dulls your confidence and distorts your perception. The mechanism behind persistent negativity is deliberate and often psychological. People who maintain a constant critical stance toward you do so not to provide constructive feedback, but to assert power, to impose control over your emotional state. They may feel threatened by your competence, by your presence, or by your success, and their negativity is a way of leveling the playing field, of diminishing your achievements, of asserting dominance without resorting to overt aggression. Unlike a direct argument, which demands engagement and resolution, persistent negativity corrodes quietly. It is an invisible weight, a slow erosion of self-assurance that is far more effective in destabilizing you than any open attack could be. Emotionally, persistent negativity is corrosive. It triggers doubt, anxiety, and internal conflict. You begin to question your choices, your decisions, your instincts. Every interaction becomes a test. Will they find fault today? Will they challenge my perception, dismiss my work, or subtly criticize me again? This constant state of alertness is exhausting. You cannot relax in their presence because their energy is calibrated to unbalance you. And over time, you start to internalize their negativity, absorbing it as if it were truth, even when it is a reflection of their own fears, insecurities, or jealousy. Persistent negativity teaches you to doubt yourself, to second-guess your actions, to measure your words, and to shrink your expression in ways that serve their need to maintain superiority. Persistent negativity also thrives on consistency. It is not limited to work or specific interactions. It permeates multiple aspects of engagement. They find fault in your ideas, your achievements, your appearance, your decisions, your habits, and even in your intentions. It is a relentless pattern, an unbroken thread woven into your perception of them. Because it is consistent, because it repeats itself over time, it cannot be dismissed as a bad day or a minor misunderstanding. It becomes the lens through which you view the relationship, the environment, and even your own abilities. Each negative comment reinforces the previous one, building a cumulative weight that becomes difficult to ignore, difficult to resist, and difficult to counter without confrontation. One of the most insidious aspects of persistent negativity is its ability to manipulate others' perceptions. They do not limit criticism to private interactions. They may inject doubt into shared spaces, conversations with peers, or social interactions where your reputation or efforts are observed. A comment that questions your judgment, a subtle dismissal of your contribution, or a hint of sarcasm in a public context spreads influence. Others may not immediately see the intent, but the seed of doubt is planted. Your work, your presence, and your achievements are subtly reframed through the lens of their negativity, and often you feel compelled to defend yourself not just against them, but against the ripple effect their energy creates. Persistent negativity is also highly strategic. It is rarely random or chaotic. It is calculated to maintain influence over your emotional landscape. They may avoid outright confrontation because confrontation risks exposure, resistance, or accountability. Instead, they maintain a constant stream of criticism that erodes self-confidence, making you hesitant, cautious, and self-doubting. Over time, you may modify your behavior to avoid triggering further negativity, altering your natural expression, your choices, even your ambitions, in order to maintain peace or avoid conflict. And in doing so, you inadvertently give them the control they seek, allowing their hatred to shape the boundaries of your self-expression without ever needing to confront it directly. The psychological impact of persistent negativity is profound and long-lasting. Unlike a single insult or a moment of anger, persistent negativity seeps into the core of your self-perception. You may begin to question your value, your competence, and even your right to exist fully in shared spaces. You may start to carry the weight of their judgment into other relationships, projecting their criticism onto yourself and your actions in ways that are deeply internalized. It is exhausting, destabilizing, and relentless because it forces a constant negotiation with an invisible adversary, a presence whose approval you seek but may never receive, and whose consistent negativity becomes a measure of your own self-worth, whether you realize it or not. Lack of empathy is one of the most subtle, yet unmistakable indicators that someone harbors deep-seated dislike or hatred toward you. It is not expressed through anger, avoidance, or even criticism. It is expressed through indifference, through the absence of acknowledgement, through a consistent failure to meet the most basic expectations of human connection. When someone lacks empathy, they do not see your emotions, your struggles, your successes, or even your presence as meaningful. Your feelings do not register on their radar. Your pain, your joy, your vulnerability, they are invisible to them, or worse, they are dismissed as insignificant. This absence of understanding is more corrosive than outright conflict because it communicates to the soul that you are alone, that your experience is irrelevant, and that your humanity is unrecognized. Empathy is the bridge that connects one human being to another. It allows for recognition, for compassion, for the acknowledgement that someone else's inner life is as real, as valid, as complex as your own. When that bridge is missing, the gap becomes a void. Every attempt to connect meets silence or indifference. You may share your feelings, your triumphs, or your failures, and receive nothing in return, not advice, not encouragement, not acknowledgement, only the absence of engagement. It is not that they respond with cruelty, it is that they respond with nothing at all. And the absence of response carries weight because it is not neutral. Indifference is the shadow form of hostility. To be unseen, unheard, and unacknowledged by someone who matters is a deep, silent wound, and one that communicates hatred more powerfully than any argument, insult, or attack. A lack of empathy manifests in many forms. They may ignore your emotional cues, your subtle hints, or your direct expressions. When you are hurt, they do not recognize it. When you are celebrating, they do not acknowledge it. When you seek understanding, they do not respond. They may feign attention, nodding mechanically, responding with phrases that sound polite but carry no genuine engagement. And yet their absence is loud. The subtle cues you look for, the warmth, the recognition, the resonance, never appear. Over time, this pattern becomes unmistakable. You begin to see that your efforts to be understood, to be acknowledged, to be valued are consistently met with emptiness, and the emptiness itself speaks volumes. Lack of empathy is also manipulative. By refusing to engage with your emotions, they maintain control over the dynamic between you. They dictate the terms of interaction, deciding what matters and what does not. In doing so, they assert power without confrontation, dominance without overt aggression. Your emotional energy, your need for recognition becomes irrelevant to them, and in this disregard, they impose their will. It is a subtle, insidious form of emotional control because it forces you into a constant state of self-regulation. You begin to suppress your own feelings, to question whether your emotions are valid, to doubt whether anyone could or would care, because the person whose attention you value shows no capacity for understanding. The effect of persistent lack of empathy is deeply destabilizing. It creates a void where affirmation, connection, and validation should exist. You may feel invisible in their presence, unseen in your efforts, unheard in your expressions. Over time, the repeated experience of being ignored or dismissed erodes confidence, distorts perception, and fosters self-doubt. You start to question your worth, your capacity to communicate, your right to expect understanding. And this internalization is precisely what makes lack of empathy so dangerous. It is not an overt attack that you can defend against. It is a slow, relentless erosion of self-perception, a quiet poison that seeps into your sense of identity. A lack of empathy often appears selectively, which makes it even more disorienting. They may show awareness or understanding to others, offering warmth or connection in situations where you are absent. But with you, the response is absent, muted, or hollow. This selective engagement is a form of comparison, a silent demonstration that your experiences are not worthy of the same recognition. It is a quiet yet devastating way to communicate that your presence, your feelings, your struggles do not matter in the sphere of their attention. This selective empathy, or the lack thereof, teaches you the unspoken lesson that you are expendable in the emotional hierarchy they maintain, that you are invisible in spaces where connection should naturally exist. Emotionally, the consequences are heavy. You may experience frustration, confusion, or even a gnawing sense of isolation. You may wonder if the problem lies within yourself, if your emotions are too much, too little, too complicated, or too simple. And in this uncertainty, the person who lacks empathy has already achieved their silent aim: to destabilize your sense of certainty, to undermine your trust in your own perception, to make you question the validity of your feelings. And yet, the lack of empathy does not need to be accompanied by malice or cruelty to be devastating. Its very absence, its refusal to meet the human need for recognition, is enough to communicate the deepest form of disregard. The subtlety of lack of empathy makes it especially dangerous in long-term interactions. Over time, patterns of indifference accumulate into a pervasive sense of neglect. You may find yourself adjusting your expectations, holding back your emotions, filtering your expressions, and silently compensating for the absence of acknowledgement. Every attempt at connection is weighed against the predictable response of indifference. You become hyper-aware of your own emotional output, modifying your behavior in hopes of eliciting even a minimal sign of recognition. And this constant self-monitoring is draining. because the emptiness is consistent. They will not validate, they will not celebrate, they will not comfort. Their disregard is the constant, unchanging landscape against which your life unfolds, and you cannot ignore its impact on your perception of yourself, your relationships, and your ability to feel fully seen. Lack of empathy is also revealing of true character. People may speak politely, smile, or engage superficially, but when emotion, vulnerability, or authenticity appears, the absence of recognition becomes apparent. They do not rise to the presence of your experience. They remain unaffected, unmoved, and untouched. And in this silence, you understand that their engagement is conditional, selective, and limited to areas where your existence does not challenge them or demand recognition. It is in this selective blindness, this consistent disregard, that hatred or deep dislike reveals itself more clearly than confrontation ever could. Manipulation and sabotage are among the clearest signs that someone harbors deep-seated hatred, yet they often unfold in ways that are invisible to casual observation. This is not the open confrontation of anger or dispute. It is a quiet, calculated orchestration designed to weaken, destabilize, or control you without exposing the perpetrator to accountability. The manipulator does not confront openly because direct conflict risks resistance, awareness, or retaliation. Instead, they operate in the shadows, planting seeds of doubt, diverting opportunities, and subtly influencing the environment to their advantage, all while keeping their intentions hidden. The mastery of manipulation lies in its invisibility. You may not realize you are being influenced, misdirected, or undermined until the effects are already manifesting in your life. Sabotage, in its quiet form, is equally insidious. Unlike a blatant attack, sabotage does not seek to destroy openly. It aims to make your path more difficult, to create obstacles that appear coincidental, natural, or the result of circumstance. A sabotaging person may withhold key information that you need to succeed, delay actions that are crucial to your progress, or subtly misrepresent facts to others in ways that cast doubt on your competence or integrity. Each act is small, almost trivial, but when accumulated over time, these actions form a web of obstruction, a network of barriers that make it increasingly challenging to maintain confidence, control, or momentum in your endeavors. And because the sabotage is covert, you are left questioning yourself, wondering if mistakes were your own or if circumstances conspired against you, all while the orchestrator watches from the shadows, unmoved and unchallenged. Manipulation and sabotage are often intertwined. Manipulation is the art of shaping perception, guiding decisions and influencing outcomes without explicit force, while sabotage is the subtle removal or distortion of resources, opportunities, or support. Together, they create an environment where you are constantly second, guessing yourself, negotiating your space, and navigating hidden pitfalls that only they fully perceive. This combination is deeply exhausting because it forces perpetual vigilance. You cannot act freely or confidently, because the hidden mechanisms of sabotage are unpredictable, and the manipulative tactics of influence shape your perception of reality. You begin to doubt your instincts, your judgment, and even the motivations of others around you, because the manipulator has created a network of unseen pressure points that influence everything you do. A hallmark of manipulation is that it preys on trust. People are far more vulnerable when they assume goodwill or integrity in others. The manipulator exploits this trust, presenting themselves as a supporter, a confidant, or a neutral observer, while quietly steering your decisions, shaping the narrative around you, or planting doubt in the minds of those whose opinions matter. They may feign concern for your well-being while subtly encouraging choices that destabilize your position, or they may present information selectively, giving you only partial truths so that your actions lead to outcomes that appear accidental, but are in fact orchestrated. Every subtle nudge, every carefully framed suggestion, every half-truth becomes a tool to exert control without ever raising suspicion. Sabotage often functions similarly but targets the structural elements of your life, your work, or your relationships. It is rarely overt because overt sabotage invites confrontation or discovery. Instead, it occurs in delays, omissions, miscommunications, or deliberate distractions. A critical email is lost or delayed, an introduction to a key connection never happens, a plan you rely upon is subtly undermined through misinformation. Each act is small and seemingly innocent, but the cumulative effect is that you struggle to gain traction, to achieve your goals, or to maintain the confidence necessary to thrive, And while you focus on solving the visible problems, you may not even recognize the origin of the difficulties because the sabotage is deliberate yet hidden, personalized, and targeted. Emotionally, manipulation and sabotage are deeply destabilizing. They create an ongoing sense of unease, a subtle anxiety that arises from unpredictability and the repeated experience of interference. You feel the effects in your confidence, your ability to trust, and your sense of agency. When you encounter obstacles that feel mysterious, when outcomes do not match effort, or when people seem to influence you or your environment in ways you cannot fully trace, the psychological weight of the manipulation begins to accumulate. You may start to question your own judgment, your intelligence, your capability, and even your moral right to act independently, because the manipulator has crafted an environment where doubt and uncertainty dominate. Manipulation and sabotage also rely on subtle social dynamics. They are often not confined to one-on-one interactions, but spread into networks, communities, and professional environments. Rumors may be seeded, impressions carefully shaped, and narratives quietly controlled so that others perceive you in ways that benefit the manipulator. Your credibility may be subtly questioned, your achievements reframed, or your intentions misrepresented. And because the manipulator often maintains a veneer of politeness, professionalism, or neutrality, others may not recognize the distortion. The sabotage functions silently, influencing perception and shaping outcomes without ever exposing the person responsible to criticism or accountability. The impact of long-term manipulation and sabotage is profound. They force you into a state of constant assessment, calculation, and adjustment. You may find yourself second-guessing your own instincts, modifying your behavior preemptively, or overanalyzing every interaction in an attempt to avoid the subtle traps that have been set. Over time, this sustained exposure erodes self-confidence, reduces spontaneity, and fosters a persistent tension because the manipulator has created an environment where your actions are never fully your own. You are responding to the invisible influence of another, recalibrating constantly, always adjusting, and never fully free to act without anticipation of hidden consequences. Manipulation and sabotage are not always malicious in the overt sense. They may stem from envy, fear, insecurity, or a desire for control. But regardless of motivation, their effect is the same. They destabilize, disempower, and diminish the person who is targeted. Their mastery lies in invisibility, in subtlety, in the ability to shape reality without confrontation, and in the psychological leverage they maintain over perception and action. Every calculated act, every controlled omission, every orchestrated misdirection communicates, without words, that your presence, success, and autonomy are unwelcome, that they prefer to guide your outcomes covertly rather than confront you openly. Emotional contagion is one of the most subtle and profound ways someone can demonstrate hatred, yet it often goes unnoticed because it is not spoken or written, it is felt. Unlike overt attacks, manipulation, or avoidance, emotional contagion operates on the level of energy, mood, and atmosphere. It is the silent transfer of tension, discomfort, irritation, or negativity from one person to another, often without a word being said. When someone harbors deep dislike or hatred toward you, their emotional state radiates outward, and you, consciously or unconsciously, absorb it. This is not coincidence. They do not need to say anything for their feelings toward you to shape your experience. Their energy alone is enough to influence your emotional world subtly, consistently, and profoundly. Emotional contagion works because humans are wired to respond to the moods and expressions of others. We mirror body language, vocal tone, and energy unconsciously. When someone emits hostility, annoyance, or indifference, our nervous system picks it up. A heavy sigh, a tense posture, a subtle tightening of facial muscles, or a cold gaze, all of these transmit signals that our brain interprets as cues to respond. When someone dislikes you, these cues become a continuous undercurrent in every interaction, shaping your perception, influencing your emotional state, and conditioning your responses. You may leave an encounter feeling drained, anxious, or irritated without understanding why. And often, this pattern repeats so consistently that it begins to feel like a part of your reality, as if you are constantly under subtle attack. One of the most insidious aspects of emotional contagion is that it does not require intention, yet it is amplified when intentional. Some people are naturally unaware of their energy, but when someone actively harbors negative feelings, their emotional state becomes a deliberate instrument. They may remain superficially polite or neutral, but their inner disdain, irritation, or resentment leaks outward. It manifests in subtle cues, the way they react to your words, the micro expressions that flicker across their face, the subtle changes in their tone or timing. Even when smiling or speaking kindly, their energy carries an undertone of tension, control, or hostility that others, especially you, can sense. Over time, this creates a persistent emotional friction that wears on your psyche. Emotional contagion is dangerous because it bypasses rational understanding. Words can be challenged, logic can be applied, arguments can be resolved. But energy is absorbed unconsciously. You feel it in your body, in your mood, in your attention. You may notice a tightening in your chest, a heaviness in your limbs, a tension in your posture, or a subtle anxiety that rises when they enter the room. This is not imagined. It is the physiological impact of exposure to their energy. And because it operates at a subconscious level, it is difficult to defend against. You may try to ignore them, but their energy finds its way into your consciousness, shaping your emotions, your perception, and even your behavior in ways that you do not immediately recognize. Another characteristic of emotional contagion is its ability to influence environments and relationships. People who harbor negativity toward you often project it not just at you, but into shared spaces. Meetings, conversations, social gatherings, these become subtly colored by their emotional state. Others may feel the tension without understanding the source, and you may find yourself isolated in your perception, trying to navigate an invisible current of hostility or disapproval. Their energy shapes the atmosphere, affects collaboration, and shifts the emotional baseline for everyone involved. It is subtle sabotage at a level beyond words, a force that molds reality without overt action, and it is exhausting to endure over time. Persistent exposure to this emotional contagion has profound effects on your inner state. You may begin to anticipate their presence with anxiety, dread interactions, or modify your behavior to avoid triggering negative energy. Your confidence may erode, your sense of comfort in shared spaces may diminish, and your perception of your own emotional stability may falter. Over time, you start to internalize their emotional state as if it were your own. Their irritation, their disdain, or their resentment becomes mirrored in your thoughts and moods. You may feel inexplicably tense, frustrated, or upset even in the absence of any direct conflict. And yet, the subtlety of this process makes it difficult to identify its source, leaving you questioning your own reactions, your own resilience, and even your own emotional intelligence. Emotional contagion also reveals the depth of hatred more clearly than overt expressions sometimes do. Someone can smile, nod, or speak politely, but their energy may carry the weight of disdain. This creates a dissonance between surface appearances and felt reality. You sense the tension, the negativity, the discomfort they radiate, and it shapes your experience far more than words could. The consistency of this emotional projection over time leaves no room for doubt. Their feelings toward you are not transient, not circumstantial. They are persistent, embedded, and potent. You feel their energy as a force that pushes, pulls, constrains, and shapes your emotional world without ever needing to articulate intent. Emotional contagion is particularly insidious because it exploits your natural sensitivity to others. Those who are empathetic, attentive, or conscientious are disproportionately affected. Their openness and responsiveness, qualities that are strengths in healthy relationships, become vulnerabilities in the presence of someone who consistently projects negativity. You absorb the tension, carry it unconsciously, and allow it to influence your mood, decisions, and self-perception. The person who dislikes you uses this energy unconsciously or intentionally to maintain influence over your emotional state, making it difficult for you to act freely, think clearly, or feel fully safe in their presence. Over time, the cumulative effect of emotional contagion is profound. It shapes your perception of reality, your self-confidence, and even your sense of belonging. You may find yourself questioning your value, doubting your judgment, or becoming hyper-aware of the subtle cues they emit. You learn to navigate their presence cautiously, modifying your behavior, anticipating their reactions, and unconsciously absorbing the weight of their negativity as if it were part of your environment. And because this energy transfer occurs below the level of conscious awareness, it is difficult to resist, deflect, or address directly, making emotional contagion one of the most powerful, silent, and destructive expressions of hatred.